Today, it's Edwin's Monday evening property rant. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to this post covering finance and property news. It's countdown to Christmas, of course, but we can still squeeze a rant with Edwin on the Monday evening. Edwin, welcome back. I hope it's all is good over there. And, well, we're going to have a bit of a sense of maybe your first thoughts for next year, but also just a bit of a reflection on this last year. And interestingly, to see how different the opinions are out there as to what's going to happen.
Well, it is going to be interesting, and as we said earlier, earlier in the month, we said it's all going to be about data, and that's what we're joining forces with Louis Christopher next year to really put out some live data, real conversations around what's happening property on the ground with us folks that are that visit agencies, talk to agencies, as opposed to people that just sit behind a computer in their ivory towers, punching out AI information that little do they know that most of it's bullshit anyway. But look, it was an interesting year. Many at the beginning of the year called that there was going to be a downturn. You and I myself, I said that the price is going to increase. We're going to talk a little bit more about my predictions for 2026. As well, Cook's got his post out earlier as well, so we're gonna overlay some of my thoughts with what the Cook is saying. It's sort of like an inverse Kramer from America, the Cook, with his predictions here in Australia, I guess. But it's been an interesting year for property prices in many regions going up because of government policies. The first-time buyers being thrown under the bus again, thrown under the train, thrown under a steamroller, thrown under the ferries, whatever. They just got bounced left, right, and centre, and all with the guise of announceables, with the guise of gifts, buy my vote policies, and that was the unfortunate thing. And but in general terms, the industry, Martin, I believe we are well and truly back to where we were before the pandemic in 2019. Where a lot of the stakeholders, officers, real estate officers across New South Wales, across Sydney, are struggling once again. And I don't believe that this time around there's going to be a lifeline like there was with the pandemic and everything shut down, and we got JobKeeper. The sales numbers that you and I have been talking about for the last couple of years have been low, and this year have been absolutely lower. Regardless of the fact that the mainstream talk about the increasing listing numbers, but when you start breaking it all down, it's increase of listing numbers based on the thousands of vacant land lots that have been just forever increasing across Melbourne and Sydney. So that skewed the real numbers on market. So the transactions haven't been there for the industry. Its auctions have absolutely floundered. And they've ended up in a pile of caca because people I believe, are losing confidence in the auction strategy, and you and I are of the opinion that confidence is even going to wane a lot more in 2026. So it's going to be it's going to be very interesting how 2026 starts with lower than last year's startups, with a lot of the different data points that we look at. And I think the last auction that I attended, probably will be attending for 2025, sums up where we're finishing off, and perhaps where we're going to be starting in 2026 with the auction campaigns. And it was the auction over at on the other side of Bankstown there, and it was an interesting summary. It was a Condell Park, interesting summary of what happened there, where the price points were, what the agent was guiding. It was pretty much on the money all along. And it was more to do with the vendor's expectations based on what the agencies are telling the vendor as opposed to the listing agent was telling the vendor and informing the vendor, and it all came to a heap because of agents. Agents are going to be playing this silly game, kicking off 2026, and that is whispering in the ears of listings that they didn't get, whispering in the ears of the vendors of the listings that they didn't get, that they could get them more money. And this is just the nature, one of the bad faces of personas of the industry, that causes a lot of disdain, causes a lot of it increases the bad reputation that we get. So that's where we are, Martin, with regards to the with the way that we're finishing. Not a great finish, but it's going to see. And I don't believe that the construction industry is going to get any better either in 2026.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting story of this past year. And look, if you read the mainstream portals, this quite amused me. This was talking about a record-breaking year for sales in Sydney. This is actually Nerida talking about this, and she's quoting Cronulla at 22.5 million, Mossburn at 50 million, Kenthurst at 11.5 million, Castle Hill at 9 million plus, Kellyville 4.4, Balcombe Hills 3.63. Now, I just want to say this is not the main part of the property market that she's talking about here, but nevertheless, claiming that boom, 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 thanks to the interest rate cuts and a lot of buyers coming back into the market. And this one here for Melbourne, records tumble as prices hit highs. Again, quoting some very significant large transactions. But of course, the point is, Edwin, this is not the bulk of transactions that are done. They're not at the 50 million level, right? So this is just a little bit of froth. Of course, it's going for clicks, and there's a lot of clicks through the year this year from those hangers-on. And of course, it's been the story of must get in now, and property investors must get in, first-time buyers must get in, etc., etc. But the problem, of course, is that on the ground, it's a very different story. And I find it quite fascinating that we're at the end of the year in the situation where some people are now suggesting that things could actually be going a little bit quiet. And with the interest rate expectations now changing, people are now suggesting that, maybe we're not going to see any more rate cuts and maybe a rate rise next year. Some people are now thinking, well, maybe things will change. But as we'll come on to see shortly, of course, again, you have to go into the granular local markets to see what's going on. And in some markets... Yeah, look, go on.
So I was going to say, you've got Nerida Coningsby. Where is she working now? She's working for Ray White. So she's the senior economist for Ray White. Good on her. And she's just plugging, towing the line. I think she'd get a pay decrease if she didn't say this sort of thing. Look, for what it's worth, I believe in one of my predictions that we'll talk about later on is that the high end property market is going to get a little bit of a rebound in 2026. And again, but it goes back to what it is that people are after and who are chasing these properties and what properties they are. Like you could have one next door that it could be absolutely flounder on market, regardless of what price point they want to ask. It all comes back to the bells and whistles. It all comes back to how the properties are marketed. So it's going to be location, and who's marketing the property and where and how they're going to be marketing the property. Look, I can tell you now, Martin, that there was a high net worth individual that flew in from Indonesia on Saturday. Flew in on a private jet. One of my colleagues picked him up after he flew into Sydney on his private jet. Picked him up from the airport. Got a high ranking official. Basically in and out of the international airport, and went for a tour of, for 2-bedroom apartments for one of his sons in the Zetland area and those areas around there, in order for his son to not to rent but to have his own place of residency. So we've got these kind of people coming in for specific reasons. So this is where where, as you said, it's clickbait. It's a feel good story. There's been a lot being pumped out about Ray White on social media platforms across the board, and good luck to them. I mean, they've got the marketing. They've got the marketing network. They're boasting over 1,000 offices across Australia and New Zealand. So I mean, they've got to really, they've got to pump it up. So that's so. At the end of the day, like you and I say, Martin, show me the data and I'll show you the dollars. So that's what it comes back to. So of course we're going to get those stories. Melbourne. I think, again, we'll talk about in my predictions later on where I see the Melbourne market going and why it's going to flounder even more and drop more later on. We'll talk about that. But I think we go back to the starting point. 2026 is going to be about real data. And there's going to be a lot more crap than what we saw in 2025. And there's going to be a lot more shenanigans coming, being put out. And this is what people are going to be. You got to hold on to real data. And the unfortunate thing is, AI is just a beast that is going to skew, not so much markets. It's going to skew information so much that even the IT gurus. One of our clients is Liz Fon Jones, senior manager in one of the big companies in IT, and and they're already talking about the misinformation around AI. It's crazy what's going to happen, but 2026 is going to be a new battleground for you and me.
Well, absolutely, and it's interesting that I had a couple of one-on-one conversations this week, and in both those conversations, the households that I spoke with had actually gone into the AIs and asked the AIs about the particular property market that they were actually looking at. And they shared with me what the AI was actually talking about. And then I showed them through the one-on-one conversations what was actually going on. And they were both astonished about the gap between what the AI was serving up and all its hallucinations. There's a few sort of grains of truth in there, but it was completely off key relative to reality. And it's quite fascinating. If you ask AI about the expectations of the property market next year, guess what? They're all saying, hey, it's going to boom. But again, you have to go granular. And it's interesting just sort of reflecting that not everybody is completely bullish about 2026. Then whether you saw this, Aaron Scott from Be Right, he's been on the channel. We've had him as a conversation point a few times. Wrote this the other day, don't buy an investment property in 2026. So he's suggesting that despite the substantial growth in real estate over the past few years, investing in Australian property right now is fraught with danger and can lead to incredible financial losses. And just quickly, he goes through supply and demand imbalances, which could shift rapidly, particularly if migration drops. He talked about reverting to the mean. In some cases, we seem to be well above where perhaps the traditional expectation of prices will be, Perth in particular, and then talking about the limits of affordability. And that's a really significant issue with the fact that rates are still a lot higher than they were, and real wages, of course, have not really followed. So we're still seeing people in real terms less able to afford what they can afford today. And then the final point, of course, that the excessive real estate fees, the way that commissions and agents work, the fact they charge for separate marketing fees, et cetera, and so the question is, does the agent's marketing strategy justify the cost? All of those are great questions. And so again, it's important just to highlight that when you actually are thinking about a particular area or a particular transaction, there are some really, really, really important questions to ask, particularly now, because, I don't think you can look at the markets as an aggregate level. I don't even think you can look at a Sydney property market, because I can point to you areas in Sydney where there is considerable demand and very little supply. I can also point to other areas in Sydney, depending on, of course, how you define Sydney, where in fact there's quite a lot more property on the market, but almost nobody's buying. and therefore prices are sliding. So it is absolutely essential, more than ever, to do your due diligence. Make sure that you've got really sound information to form a basis as to what to do. And don't be misled by the AI. Don't be misled by the spooking property articles on the portals. And actually, of course, a lot of the information on the property portals themselves is being more and more restricted. So it's harder and harder for ordinary people to grab hold of good information.
This is where we're going to get into moving forward into from 2026. I think there's going to be a greater awareness that, look, at the end of the day, and this, you're going to need more people are going to need more and more professionals and professional services in order to make the right decision. There's no two ways about it, Martin. They've got to stop relying on the selling agents. BS. They've got to stop relying on the information that's passed on by the selling agents. As you and I said before, it's just a marketing tool that they're using. It's an extra marketing strategy that they have in order to fasten the transaction, in order for them, as Aaron says, to get a hefty commission and walk away. As I've always been critical of the way that that side of the service the real estate industry in servicing the clients functions, and has functioned for many decades, where they're not really looking after themselves. The priority is not the vendor, the priority is their back pocket. But you and I aren't going to change that. You've got now this evolution of AI, and obviously what the information that you feed AI, is going to determine what information you get out of it as well. And when there's lack of information, lack of transparency in the industry, there's going to be shortcomings. The other point that Aaron brings out, like where he says, where it says that don't invest. Look, I wouldn't go as far as to say don't invest. I think I go as far as to say be careful where you are going to invest, and if you are going to be moving into, because again, the unfortunate thing is that even now from my side of the fence as a buyer's advocate or a buyer's agent, there's close to or on about 2,000 buyer's agents in across Australia, which still a lot, huge. It's only a small portion of the industry when you think about it. But out of which, 95, 97% don't even visit the property that they're going to be promoting or they're going to be recommending to the clients. Most of it's just the desktop assessments and AI generated. AI generated information that's passed on to the clients, and they're still charging a hefty fee for that service, which is rather ludicrous. So information is going to be king moving forward. Data is obviously going to be king as well moving forward, and how that's gathered. But at the end of the day, Martin, it comes back to what it is that you need moving forward, and making a real good assessments and write it all down like you do with your one-to-ones. Have a deeper and better understanding as to the position that you want to move forward with, short term, medium term, and long term. I'd like to be helping more, from our side of things with Dusty. The team House Hunters, we'd like to be helping more first-time buyers getting into the market, and if there is a retraction of investors, good for the first-time buyers, because they're the people that we like to help the most, and we like to assist, and we enjoy assisting all our clients. But I get more of a kick out of helping first-time home buyers into our markets. Because it's for them, it's a lifestyle as opposed to an investment. And look, I find fun looking for property for flippers, developers, builders, and investors as well. It can be challenging, and But we seem to enjoy the side more, the side of helping first home buyers and assisting the first time home buyers coming into the market, particularly of different ethnic backgrounds that they don't have a clear understanding on how it all functions. And they get caught up in the emotion of the transaction, the emotion of the auction campaigns, the emotion of the short, even private treaty campaigns and bidding wars that are out there. All they get caught up in all that, and they see that the friends, relatives, and whomever else get caught up in that. In all that misinformation, and they make the wrong decisions. That ends up costing them a hell of a lot more. Moving forward, but the thing is, Martin, it's the people are going to have to be more open, not so much to using our service as buyers agents, but they're going to have to be more open to doing their own due diligence as opposed to relying on the selling agents. Stuff. We got to walk away. 2026 should be the year that you walk away from before you buy, prepackaged building reports and any other shiny paraphernalia that the selling agents give you. I mean, that for me, that's where it's at. That's a beginning point. But to do that, people have got to realise that they need to spend a bit on to assist them with making those decisions. Whether they subscribe to certain, there are more and more websites available that people can subscribe to on a one-offs. They don't produce everything, but at the end of the day, the service industry, I can see that is going to be of greater need. And because of the pressures that people are on. Look, if the government policies don't change, which I don't see them changing, for the next 2-3 years anyway. And as I've said before, these are names or numbers that will change, but it's just they'll take away with the left hand, and then they'll start producing with the right hand. I mean, it's just a shifting of dynamics because of the sheer fact and where we are, Martin. That's the economic position that we're in as a nation. So, for me, I would hope, but I don't believe it's going to happen, that the investors are going to pull back on investing in homes, in the freestanding homes that the first home buyers should have first choice at.
Yes, I think that's probably right. And I agree with you, actually. I enjoy all my one-to-one conversations, and I've learned a lot from people shifting up, shifting down, buying investment properties. But the first-time buyer conversations are, for me, particularly exciting because it shows that there are more and more people who are alert to asking the right questions on the way into buying. And that's a good thing, rather than just being swept up in the you must buy, 5% deposit, buy now, we will never buy again sort of story. I'd also make the other point, Edwin, that when I talk to my property investors, and particularly those who actually are thinking about property investing, I've started to use a bit of a spreadsheety thing that shows what happens over a 3 to 5 year period with all of the costs coming in and the potential revenue coming in from the rents, and therefore what the actual return is over that period, and what assumption you need to make in terms of capital appreciation to just cover those costs. And it's really quite scary when you actually put the two together and understand that all of those people who are predicating property investment purchases simply on the basis of capital appreciation, just how much capital appreciation you need just to break even. So it is a really interesting observation, particularly when you add in the costs of transacting and the costs of maintenance and, of course, the interest costs and the sinking fund that you need to put aside for future issues with the property, all of those things. So it is fascinating. The other angle on all of this, of course, is what's happened with migration. So a lot of the stories in the newspapers over the last year or so has been on the high demand from migrants coming in. The latest data, of course, that we got, and this is actually nicely summarized by Shane Wright here, said that net overseas migration, that, as defined, being in the country for at least 12 of the 16 months, is actually at just over 305,600. Now, that was actually a little lower than was forecast in the government budget, but well and above the 260,000 that was expected when Jim Chalmers released the 24-25 budget in May last year. And interestingly, the comparisons with Canada is fascinating because there, Canada is actually seeing a fall in the numbers. Its population fell by 0.2%, or 76,000 in the 3 months to October, after a change in migration policy by the Carney government. And in fact, in New Zealand as well, we are seeing prices ease down because of lower migration. Now, I made a show about this, and I called it, Let's Play Some Migration Numbers Number Wang, because depending on how you look at the numbers and which numbers you actually believe to be the most accurate, you can actually make the migration numbers read higher or lower than the official statistic as quoted by the ABS there. But the fact is, we've still got considerable population growth. You know, whether it's 300,000 or 250,000 or 380,000, there's still a lot more people coming in looking for property. But I want to highlight what you said earlier on. A lot of the people who are coming are not necessarily even looking for permanent migration for themselves, but they're actually using overseas money to buy property for kids, for example, to alleviate them having to go into the rental sector while they're getting their education in Australia. Or people who are investing deliberately in Australian property for the long term because they believe that on an international basis, Australia is a safer place to invest relative to other parts of the country, or the world, I should say. So there's a really important story here. It isn't purely the numbers of people, but also, as we've said on several occasions, when you look at the size of the Australian property market, which is relatively small, relative to the rest of Asia or beyond, there's a huge prospective demand for property. And that's going to put a bit of a floor on any prospective falls in value, particularly in attractive properties, standalone properties in some parts of the country. So again, it comes back, absolutely back. So you've got to understand the local market, the local demand. Interestingly, in that information from the ABS, they also showed quite a lot of movements between different states, of course. Western Australia was a very big magnet for people. There was some loss of population towards Queensland. The population in Victoria sort of wobbled sideways, didn't drop as much as perhaps some people expected. But again, it shows you that you can't just aggregate Australia into one lump. You need to do the work. And if we can help people by providing more granular information and more specific information so they make better decisions, then I think we've achieved in our objective.
Well, that's the thing, Martin. That's where like with regards to look at the changes with the real estate industry itself, then the legislation around the rental market. Look how much that the landscape changed in Victoria and how that's changing here in New South Wales as well. Also in Queensland, we're going to see a lot more that's going to affect investors as well as first home buyers or those entering downsizing, upsizing, whatever the case may be. But more broadly, in investors. And moving forward into 2026, when you got the AML, and it's going to put a lot of pressure on the self-managed properties. That's going to put a lot of pressure on that cash economy. In other words, there's got to be a pivot point, and that's the whole aim of the AML to rein in that cash economy. And to rein in the overseas money that's coming into Australia to be parked in residential real estate. So it's going to be interesting how that side of the coin plays out in 2026. I've got my views on that already. I formed certain views with that, and in some areas, as you said, some areas we're going to see a lot more properties of freestanding homes on the market than in other suburbs. But let's not forget that Sydney has over 630 suburbs in the Sydney region, and there's over 34 or 36 LGAs in Sydney as well. So it's geographically it's a big area. In terms of the property market, it's not that big, but we do see certain trends as we get a lot more properties on market in certain suburbs. We see how the demand and the supply and demand shifts values or skews the rise in the value of the properties in certain markets. We're seeing that play out at the moment in the Greystanes with your duplex sites, where they're inundated with duplex sites because all the duplex sites that got bought a year and a half ago, now they're all coming to completion, and now they all want to be sold before the end of the year. And this is where the unfortunate thing is that people paid, builders and developers paid, overpaid for the land, and they're now paying the price because it cost them a lot more than what they thought it would cost to build. And now there's a glut of property, there's a glut of duplexes in Greystone. So agents are having a hard time, selling those completed duplexes. You saw how the no grounds eviction notices affected some of the touristy parts of the Sydney region, the extended Sydney regions, your Central Coast and your Upper Blue Mountains and your South Coast. So there's a lot that's going to play out. So it's very, very important how people that go into 2026 looking at buying property, whether to invest or to as a principal place of residence, that they're going sober and with a clear mind.
Absolutely, and I think that's the point: clear mind and sweep away the BS that's out there and make good decisions. Of course, that's what we want. Now, it's also worth highlighting, Edwin, that there's a real big stoush going on between councils and New South Wales Government with regards to development proposals, and nothing is perhaps more a centre of gravity than this 9,000 story. Two councils, 9,000 homes in the hills is too far. Two councils are resisting a state plan to build more than 9,000 homes in Sydney's northwest, with one calling the haphazard and unjustified development to be scrapped, and others are requesting the number of dwellings be slashed. And this is in and around the precinct of Cherrybrook, for example, and a couple of other areas there too. Now, this is, I think, an archetypal example, Edwin, of we're going to see a lot more of this, where effectively we've got different interests pushing for different outcomes. But if you look back at some of the recently approved developments, they have been haphazard. They have probably been too dense, and they're not necessarily offering properties in line with what people need or want or desire, which goes right back to our high rise versus low rise. And, a lot of people would prefer to live in a low rise development rather than a high rise development for all the reasons we've discussed. But this to me is a really important, example of what's going on. And 12 councillors unanimously voted for a pause in the proposal and an urgent meeting with the New South Wales Planning Minister. So how do you make sense of this, Edwin?
Well, you don't. You don't make sense of it at all, because you've got first it was gazetted to have 3,000 dwellings. Now they're trying to push 9,000, and again it's all ad hoc policy on the run because of the pressure that they're starting to feel. The chickens are coming home to roost. In other words, once as I said before, once AML comes into play next year, the rental landscape is going to change a lot, and we're going to see a lot of these cash budget accommodation homes are either going to be put on the market for sale, or they're going to be, they've got to reduce. There's got to be a reduction in numbers in tenants because they've got to go back into your normal rental side of things, your traditional rental markets, right? But it doesn't mean that there's going to be a lot more properties for rent, because what it means is that there's going to be a lot of other properties that are going to be absorbed, because now let's say you go from 10 occupants of a 3-bedroom house to 5 occupants of a 3-bedroom house, but the other occupants now have to go and lease another 3-bedroom house. So So it's going to get absorbed. So there's a lot of things that are going to be shifting and changing next year. That's going to put a lot more pressure on the government, on the state government and on the federal government in order to come clean with the numbers. We've now gone from 1.2 needed promise and needed to 1.7, as HIA has been saying, and then at the end of next year it'll be 2.4 million homes that are needed. And then you've got what I started putting out 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago, was define homes. Define homes. It's not when everybody talks about homes, but it's not homes. It's high-rise dog boxes where people don't want to live, where the general population don't want to live, and now you want to put high-rise developments, from Epping to Cherrybrook, around there, where you're going to have potential high-rise developments of up to 28 stories high, 28 levels. Then when you start going up, you've also got to go down. You've got to excavate. So even if it was all, let's say, even if it was all kosher, even if it was all hunky-dory and it was all good to move forward, even if they started digging the foundations, digging the basements now, it's not going to be 5 years before they deliver the goods. So what do you do until then? And that's 9,000, and from memory on that story was to be delivered up to 2034 from memory of 2037. So I mean that's a long time to wait, right? So what do people do? What do people do in the meantime? And this is where people don't grasp the fact that we're such a small market, and if we keep on piling on new interested parties into our market, not necessarily those that are seeking PR, those that are cashed up, those that are just simply wanting to buy an investment property for education reasons because they're finding it very hard to rooms around the city. Makeshift rooms in some apartments, I've been told, are now fetching $450 for a tiny room. That's insane price. And this is where, and you've got students that are just, they've got to pay the fees, they've got to pay food. They're on top of that, it's board. So it's becoming a very, very costly exercise. So therefore, that's why the more well-off individuals are simply just buying. And so they'll absorb some of the better properties around the educational facilities. But when you start talking about from Epping to Cherrybrook, I mean, some of those areas are dead zones. They're in the middle of nowhere, and you're going to be putting 28-story levels there. It's crazy stuff. So it's just policy on the run, Martin. And again, we go back to, they're not even going to fulfill the purpose of sustainable dwellings for first-time buyers, because the prices that they will have to be sold off at will be mouth-watering prices. When you start doing the calculations and the numbers on the value of the land in those areas, to the construction cost, to the profit margins that the banks expect the builders and the developers to make. So you're going to be upwards of, in those areas, you're going to be upwards of 1.5 to 1.6 for a 2-bedroom apartment.
Absolutely. And there's another factor which is just worth reflecting on, because, of course, the Western Airport is now, there or thereabouts, and the flight paths are now actually really showing up. And it's interesting where those flight paths are actually going over. This is actually the sort of the immediate picture. And you can see there that some of the northwestern areas around Sydney are on the list, including Bella Vista and Castle Hill and places like that. And that begs the question. And then if you take a slightly broader view, you can see here also, again, where the yellow arrivals and bluish departures are actually coming from. And it is fascinating that people who've not had a lot of aircraft noise until now. Well, they're going to be in the middle of it now, and I wonder what that's going to do to property. I wonder what it's going to the poor quality of construction and the fact that a lot of those properties won't have much noise insulation. It's going to be a bit of a problem.
Well, this is where people have got to be very, very careful moving forward because of this. In 2026 and the information that they get, this is what the Whitchurch Chatterers have been talking about, being vehemently, fervently talking about for the last few weeks, and how $3-4 million suburbs are going to be affected. I mean, they were also talking. They also brought up Bronte. These are areas that haven't really experienced noise, air pollution, noise pollution because of the fly paths. But these new fly paths again that are being introduced, and these are fly paths that are going to be running 24/7 because of Badgerys Creek Airport. So that's one of the issues with the cost. People are going to think, shit, I just paid $4 million. I just paid $5 million for a house in Castle Hill or Bella Vista. And now I'm living under the I'm going to be it's noise forever, and we're talking homes that may have five mil laminated glass, if it was a recent build, but if it's older properties that have only got the 3.28 or 3.24, 3.28 mil glass, which is the older, and they've just paid a mozza for it. I mean, they've got to redo the windows. Now, from a principal place of residence, you're going to have to suck it up and you're going to be living with it. But that comes back to, from a rental point of view, how much is it going to cost you to bring your property under the new legislation and the regulations to bring it up to speed in order to be fit for use? So you're going to have to, do all the glazing. So you're not going to get much change out of $25,000 for an average 3-bedroom home. You're going to be, if it's anything bigger than that, I mean, the sky's the limit. Then obviously insulation. Your tenant's going to demand or request for soundproofing insulation, as opposed to just your normal bats that you put up there. Your R3 or R4. So you're gonna have to go. You're gonna have to spend a bit more money on soundproofing the property. How much a rent's going to drop by in homes? We're talking about freestanding homes, and then you've got obviously what the government wants to push everybody into, and this is the high-rise developments. And they're going to, the noise, the impact is going to be greater on them, and therefore the glazing has to be thicker, has to have, look, you could, then is everything that's going to be built moving forward in these areas, is that going to be double glazing or 10 mil laminated glass in order to compensate for the noise levels? It's add-ons and costs that people are going to have to be more aware of when they buy as a principal place of residence or investment properties. Now that's if everything goes well. Then you've got obviously we're prone, and those areas are prone for shifts and changes in weather patterns. So if the planes that can't land, they're forever going to be circling around the lower mountains in the greater Western region that's going to encompass Bella Vista, Castle Hill, the hills districts, and a lot of and all the way up to the lower mountains, Blacksland. So they're just going to be forever looping around that, doing the loop until they can land. And as I said, this is going to be 24/7. So you've got new flight paths that are going to affect new areas that didn't even have a knowledge of what living under a flight path really meant, unless you lived in the inner west. So this is going to be a rude awakening. So these are all the changes that are happening on the ground in the landscape, and this is information that a lot of people won't give you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I always put the flight paths into my presentation now when it's relevant, as I do with the flood levels and those things, because that's another important factor too. And again, a lot of people don't think about that. And then, of course, the fire, fire zoning, those sorts of things. A lot of issues. But one thing I will say, Edwin, I lived in a property in Thirroul that was actually built by a builder. It was actually not badly built, but it was built with a wooden frame and then with plasterboard on the inside and with tin on the outside. And that was both the walls and the roof. And I've never been in such a noisy house as that. And when I look around at some of the construction techniques that are being used with some of the new builds that they're putting up, particularly some of the low-rise stuff, it's all framed in timber. It's all, relatively cheap. The insulation is not great. And the noise coming through the walls, not just the windows, but the walls and the roof, absolutely amazing. Now, I've been fortunate to live also in stone-built properties, and there the inside environment is just so much quieter because it's real stone or brick, actually absorbs a lot more noise than the typical buildings these days. And I actually wonder just how many people are wrestling with the noise levels they've got, let alone what's going to happen with all the more of the aircraft coming over.
That's a $64 million question. And this is where the WeChat chatters are already, as I said, they move markets. You never bet against the WeChat chatters. So if they're talking amongst the investment groups, that's they haven't said much over the year, but now the chatter is starting to pick up a bit of steam, and it's all around the new flight paths, and they're obviously advising each other what to buy, what not to buy. The good thing is, Martin, in a way that with newer construction now under the National Construction Code, the exterior walls now have to be insulated, but that's not soundproofing insulation. That's just insulation. It does dampen the noise a little bit. I think from memory, being at your place, you had a lot of glass. So, which was great for the view, not so good for the noise.
No. It wasn't double glazed. It was just single glazing, as you say, 3-point something, right? And
your one was 5. Your one was 5 mil. But look, but it doesn't really, reduce the noise levels. You really have to get up to the 10 mil, 10 mil laminated in order to. That's actually 10 mil laminated is better than having double glazing at most of the time. You get, I think, a reduction of 37 decibels with 10 mil laminated, and double glazing reduces the noise levels by 35. Which is rather interesting. Something I learned a few months ago. But your one, you had a lot of windows. Like I said, great for the views. The sunsets and everything else, but sunrises, not so good for the noise. And with all that tin around, and on a windy day, you could literally hear the sand particles hitting the corrugated iron.
Yeah, not just sand particles, and then all the leaves and branches and everything else. So, noise, I think, is something that a lot of people don't give enough attention to when they think about buying property. Now, of course, because I'm interested in audio production, I have a studio, I'm very interested in noise levels and things like that. So it is fascinating, but I think generally people, all the research shows that if you're living in a noisy environment, and it's an environment you can't control, that has a detrimental effect in terms of your health and well-being and relationships and all sorts of things. So I think that noise question is a big deal. Let's move the question forward now into 2026, Edwin, and let's start your predictions for 2026. We should say that next week we're going to run a live show on Tuesday. That's the 30th of December at 8 p.m. Sydney. and you and I will be on, and we can take questions from the audience, and we'll take some of our discussion further in terms of 2026. But let's sow some seeds. So let's take your initial predictions for 2026 now.
Okay, well, we'll go. You're going to have to help me out with this, Martin, because I just got my screen's just gone blank. You can probably see me, but I can't see anything on my screen. So we're going to run through this. So number one is look. I'm predicting a 30 to 40% reduction in offices in the industry.
Right.
And it's a big call, I know, but there are a number of data points that I'm going to go with. One of them obviously is the impact that which we've discussed before, the impact that the AML legislation and also cybersecurity policies that are going to really affect the industry. What that does in terms of another layer of compliance, another more expenditure on offices. Apart from the fact that commercial rents haven't really gone down, so they're struggling with the cost to keep offices open. Not only the biggest ones, of course, are going to be AML and cybersecurity. Add to that, around the insurances are going to climb even higher. Talking to the law fraternity that are involved with insurances because of AML, because of cybersecurity. And policies are not going to cover, as we discussed before. There's going to be a lot of insurance policies that people that are watching the show that are running offices now, real estate offices now, they've got to start looking very carefully at what the insurer is covering and not covering. A lot of stuff's being taken out of the policies, which you now have to pay a lot more for in order to get them covered again. You and I spoke about a few weeks back with regards to the actual transaction numbers have gone down in 2025. Prices have gone up, but transactions have gone down because people have got nowhere to go. That's not that they've got nowhere to go, but the choices are limited. So therefore, there's been a lot of less movement, across the board. And that's only going to, in my opinion, it's only going to get. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse in 2026 because people are going to stay put. They've got nowhere to go. So if they don't have options, they're not going to move. So the cost to run an office. A small office, even a large office, it's going to be one of the biggest concerns. And talking to my industry colleagues, talking to licensees in charge across Sydney, north, south, east, west, up the mountains, down the south coast, up the central coast. There's a lot of people that are very tired, Martin. And they're looking at all these costs, and not only real estate offices, but also lawyers and conveyancing firms. So that's going to put a lot of pressure. So therefore, some offices are obviously going to hold on a lot more than others, but I'm still thinking about whether or not I put out my predictions across the main franchise groups. But I feel that. But never across the board, my minimum is going to be about 30% by the end of 2026 if they don't get the act together.
And it's worth saying, of course, the franchise fees are also going up. So they're effectively the fees that are actually charged by those big overarching entities, and they're not going to lose the value of their businesses. So they're going to pass those down the line. Well, that means that in fact agents are going to be facing two issues. Firstly, the volumes of sales will be lower. The costs to run the business is going to be higher. So what can they actually do to try and actually square the circle? Well, the one is to try and spend less time on individual transactions, which means you don't actually get full value of the agent's capabilities potentially. Or they're going to actually play the underquoting, overquoting, well, yeah, we'll put it on for high, and then oh well, sorry, it didn't quite work, but if you take a reduction, we can get a sale. All of that's going to be there in spades, and I think it's worth highlighting the fact that when the financial pressures come onto those offices, it forces behavior of those individual agents as they're working with clients to be even worse than normal.
And that is where things start to crumble internally. The other side of that equation is that a lot of smaller operators are going to be absorbed. We're already seeing. There was I saw on LinkedIn, LJ Hooker gained 7 or 8 offices, independents, because of the way they were promoting and the startup to the AML policy, and that's created a little bit of momentum for LJ Hooker. Nobody still knows how that landscape's going to really play out. Even the law fraternity that we speak with, I mean, we speak to some of the big wigs in the law fraternity, and even they don't really know how that landscape's really going to play out. But nevertheless, it's from a starting point, we can already see a shift. The small independents are going to be joining the bigger franchise group. So again, you're going to see less competition on the ground. The industry itself will say, well, that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But it just means that the sales force again may increase in a main franchise office, because the independents from that area are going to be joining it. But it's still going to have the same number of salespeople in the area. But in terms of offices, in terms of choices, we can see that the bigger players are going to get bigger. The smaller competitors that would otherwise provide I was an independent worked as an independent for 18 years when I ran the sales and property management office, and we kept a lot of the bastards honest. We're going to lose a lot of that, and that seems to be the case across the board with a lot of industries anyway. But there's also going to be a lot of people that are just they're tired, Martin. They've had enough. They just want to move on.
Absolutely. And then let's turn on to prices. Now, of course, talking about aggregate prices is always risky because, as we've said, individual prices are moving in different places in different parts of the property market in Sydney as well as elsewhere. But nevertheless, if you had to put a stake in the ground, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking that Sydney is going to continue to go up in value across the board. Many markets are going to be and I'm going to put a peg 7 to 10%. I sort of had similar figures at the end of this year, and I think we've superseded the call that I made earlier on. I think we're going to see even the top end start to pick up a bit of a momentum because of I'm starting to see, and my eyes are being open to a lot of overseas interest that are looking at our properties in the top end very, very closely. So in terms of across the board, 7 to 10% is my call. Even if we got 1 or 2 interest rate rises, and I know that's a big call, but Martin, there's everything else that's happening around with government policies in Victoria, the investors jumping out of there. So Victoria's going to, in my opinion, it's still got another 10% to drop. That's my personal opinion. Across the board, because of government policy, government decisions, and because investors wanting out, and also you're going to have a lot of SMEs, small to medium enterprises, that are basically picking up stumps and looking at setting up shop elsewhere, and New South Wales becomes a very attractive state to be in, because the activity, and so far, fingers crossed, we're not following suit with a lot of those the policies that are being sprung up in Victoria. So then the focus comes back to Sydney. Then the construction's not really moving, so therefore, again, it comes back to supply and demand.
Absolutely. Supply and demand is it. But it's interesting that not everybody is sharing such a positive view. And interestingly, and I chuckled when I saw this, the kook, the kook who was calling for ultra low interest rates and house prices booming, has come out and said house prices are falling in Sydney and Melbourne. This is the start of something big. This weakness fits with a drop in auction clearance rates, a deterioration in the labour market, and a faltering in demand as net immigration numbers finally cool off. Well, that's interesting from the kook, but you responded, well, maybe not.
Yeah, well, see, this is the thing. This is when you just read the headline and you don't read the article and you don't go back to the source, and you don't look at the actual data. If you look at the data, the Cotality poured out that the main article came out from, that I'm sure the kook read, is in Sydney. It all comes back to high-rise developments. And you and I have been saying that for a very long time. You're not getting much change, but even that, Martin, there's going to be certain areas that, because people have got no choice, even some of the high-rise dog boxes are going to have a little bit of a rebound from the lows that we've been seeing over the last couple of years because of choice, because again, supply and demand. So, but even on the surface, you just the main article without going to the source, the kooks missed the boat there, because there's a lot of other data points that are not clear. Melbourne, of course, that's what you and I have been saying for a while, and we've been sharing with our viewers and our followers for a while, and showing how different that market has been and will continue to be until there is either a change of government policy around the whole aspect of land tax and everything else. But I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. If anything, it's going to continue to get worse. I'm waiting for the day that they're going to tax the blades of grass on your front lawn in Melbourne. It's going to get as far as that. Or the amount of strands of hair that you've got on your head. I don't know. It's just one of those crazy things, because of the debt that they're in, and the continual debt that they keep on getting themselves into because of the policy. So until that changes, that market is a stale market in my opinion, my personal opinion. So the focus is obviously goes then back to Sydney, or further up the coast, into Queensland. So then Queensland, look at the numbers there. They're very low. The property numbers there, they're agents that I know up there, and hear what they're doing, what they're selling. It's crazy. Similar to some of the outer regions of Sydney, over the mountains. What we saw in Orange, what we're seeing in a lot of other smaller towns west of Newcastle as well. So it's I think the kook's got it totally wrong, but that's his opinion. I've got different data points, and we share different data points with our clients.
Well, we'll see. I guess I'll make a quick prediction. Perth, of course, a lot of migration to Perth. Prices have been growing very strongly. There are some early indicators there that housing affordability in the West is also now getting too extended. And so I'll probably talk about that a bit more on the live show next week. One other data point that's really interesting in the Sydney area, just ask yourself the question, how many standalone homes are there under $1 million in the Sydney region now, Edwin? This is a really important point, isn't it?
Yeah, when we started looking at it, if you recall, we started looking at it at the beginning of the beginning of the year. We were just over 1,000. Now, to today's numbers, we're up to 811. But when you start going through, and I went through those listings very, very quickly. I mean, a lot of them are BS guides, in that, or they'll just sit under the million in order to capture the inquiry around the 950,000, but they really want $1.1 million for the homes, and the majority of them are duplexes or that type of dwellings. So you really, we're almost getting to zero. I did predict at the beginning of the year that 2025 was going to be the year that the freestanding home that you could buy for under for $1 million, up to $1 million, will disappear. I'd say we still got a couple of hundred left, but shit, it's not a lot, right? Think about it. Think about it. Under a thousand. Even if you counted all the other stuff that's on the domain portal, if it's just a little bit over 800 properties that are under or up to $1 million, worth up to $1 million. I'm talking about freestanding homes, but you got a big mix there. So I'm sort of thinking it's more like a few hundred properties across Sydney under $1 million.
Absolutely. And as you say, quite a lot of them just snuck under the million to try and actually get some extra interest. But when you actually start and think, well, what can you actually get for that $1 million? The answer is not a lot. Let's look at the numbers just briefly. So last week we had, on the 15th, 20,227 properties listed for sale as defined by domain in the Sydney region. And a week later, 18,390 properties. Oh, a bit of a drop there. And we can see that in the trends. The numbers are dropping. Again, you've pulled out the land, because the land, of course, has been bolstering the numbers, as you said earlier on. That's dropping as well. So we are actually coming back down to, well, areas that we've seen in recent past years.
Yeah, and if you look at the actual land lots have increased over this year, and so in reality, the last couple of weeks, when you take away the increase of land lot numbers to the real number, we've actually tapered down a lot lower than in where we were in 2024. So if the sentiment continues, and which I believe it will, we're really going to see perhaps we're going to see a continued shift downwards, which then obviously is going to put more upward trajectory in prices in many of Sydney markets. I think that 2026 we're going to see even a greater retraction in numbers, and if the numbers retract, obviously property prices will go up.
Yeah, as naturally follows one the other. And we'll just quickly look at the Melbourne market. So on the 15th, 27,379. A week later, 25,342 properties for sale. And it's worth noting that in Brisbane, in the Queensland area, 2,771 on the 15th, compared with 2,264 a week later. So again, of course, people are taking their properties off the market. The auctions are zero now over the Christmas period, compared with the previous week, as you'd expect. And as the charts here show, while the auction clearances continue to just disappear as off the radar, as you would expect. And as we said earlier on, Edwin, the truth is that the auctions as a mechanism for purchasing property is on the nose. More people are moving away from it.
Yeah, and this is so there's been an earlier retreat. Even the mainstream media calling the auction clearance rates are going a lot, because again it goes back to what the expectations are. We go back to the beginning of the show where vendors' expectations are way higher than the real market, and vendors have just been sold the dream because other agents want to get the listing. That they want the current agent to fail in order for them to get the listing. So this is going to play out in 2026. So a lot of people don't want to be the first ones to break that new ceiling to pay the newer prices as they go up. But sooner than later it's going to happen in a lot of markets, but not at the moment. And everyone's tired. The industry's tired. The agents are tired. People are tired. It's been a very tiresome 2025 for everybody. And with what's gone on of late, people are just sick and tired of the shenanigans that are going on. So I think they're calling it an early year.
Absolutely. I think that's exactly right, Edwin. And we hope that people will get refreshed over the Christmas and New Year period and come back with a little bit more enthusiasm. Just in terms of the rental sector, this is the story for Sydney. 12,405 listed on the 15th. 10,966 listed on the 22nd. So, of course, you'd expect that to fall away. In the Melbourne market, 11,368 on the 12th. 10,611 on the following week, the 22nd. And again, things quietened down over the Christmas period. I do know that there are a number of people still desperately looking for rental properties, still finding that the rents are going up and still being confronted with increases coming in from next year. So the rental sector is a disaster. And unfortunately, nothing that the governments have done over the last 12 months are doing anything to actually try and resolve the pressure in the rental sector. And in fact, it's getting worse and worse. Well, as we come to the end of the show, Edwin, you've got a tip for your last tip for 2025, I guess.
Yeah, look, and it follows on from last week's tip with regards to insurance policies, and as we spoke earlier today, it comes back to the AML and comes back to tenancies. Look, one of the things that's going to happen. One of the big potentials, one of the things that the industry and the legal fraternity are talking about that is going to occur is that if there is a reason for or a belief that fraudulent activity is happening, or there's or a claim or somebody thinks that something, some shenanigans are happening with regards to a property transaction, the powers that are going to be assigned to have control over the AML and the way that they're going to police it, they're going to freeze accounts. So when you start thinking about all accounts in an agency being frozen, people are going to start thinking, who is managing my property right now, right? And you got to start preparing as to how you can better, select agencies. Look, the industry. There's a lot of things that are said around the industry. There's a lot of people, as you get to know landlords, get to know property managers. There's a lot that are being said about the actual office that they're with and this and that. People are going to start taking note of what is being said and what they hear property managers talk about it and this and that. Because moving forward, when the AML kicks in, we're going to have offices and we're going to have a lot of reporting with mainstream media if they grasp it, if they capture it, where bank accounts are going to be frozen. And they could be frozen for weeks, and they could also be frozen, they may be frozen for months. So if your managements are with that agency that accounts have been frozen, well then think about how the banks are still going to want to get paid they still want to get paid the mortgages. The banks, the councils are going to get paid their dues. Everybody, still that's providing a service, that's providing, anything to do with your investment property. That's providing a service or a government levy they have to pay. Well, guess what? They still want to. They will still stick their hand out, and potentially there's going to be a lot of upheaval, and there's going to be a lot of disruption in that field. And I just, my tip is, if you think that you're not with the right office right now because of whatever reason, I'm not going to go into detail, but people know, Martin. People know the offices. People know because the landlords that they get to know things about certain offices. And the unfortunate thing is offices that are of specific ethnic background, ethnic origins, and they're going to have to be very, very careful, because there's going to be a lot of scrutiny around this. And the last thing you want to have is the rent monies being frozen for months until an investigation clears the office, and then the accounts are reactivated or do whatever they want to do. So it's not going to be easy for the industry, as you can see, and for investors moving forward in 2026.
And I think, the broader point is, it's worth just recalling and remembering that not all agents are the same. Not all real estate agents, not all property managing agents are the same. There are some really good ones, and there are some really, really bad ones, and there are quite a few in the middle who are maybe tipping towards bad. So you need to do the quality conversation to test that what you've got is a robust agent who will work in your best interests, whether you've got a property for investment purposes or whether you're trying to buy property or indeed trying to sell property. And there are a bunch of questions that it's really important to ask to make sure that you actually have got to your own situation secure. As you say, if you're in the situation where suddenly they were basically frozen for months, that's a big deal. So that's a really, really important salutary underscoring, I think, for the end of the year. Edwin, I will look forward to having you on the live show Tuesday. That's Tuesday the 30th, so Tuesday week at 8 p.m. And we'll chat about property this last year. We'll talk a little bit about the future, but very importantly, answer questions from the audience. And folks, if you've got questions you'd like Edwin to tackle, you can always drop them in the comments below, and we can pick them up then in the show on the 30th, or you can ask them live on the 30th as well. So I look forward to that. Edwin, I wish you the very best for the Christmas period. I hope you have a chance to sort of chill, relax, just stop and smell the roses. And I just want to point people to this show. I made this show yesterday, Good versus Evil in Memoriam. And on this particular show, I mentioned briefly the issue at Bondi, but more importantly, I also mentioned the fact that this is the 4th anniversary of Jill's death. And I want to highlight and leave everyone with this thought, that Jill's legacy was to raise awareness of asbestos and asbestos exposure. It's still there, it's still lurking, and unfortunately, a lot of people are still dying from it. So if you want to know more about that, check out that show. And, I just pause to remember Jill and her efforts with regard to asbestos. But more broadly, we hope that everyone will have a wonderful Christmas and New Year. And we'll look forward to be back on the 30th, Edwin. See you then.
All the very best, Martin. And to all our followers and our viewers, all the very best. And may have a joyful end of year and festive season. Take care.
Take care. We'll see you soon. Happy Christmas.